They told me not to say anything at my son's wedding. But they forgot I once lived by speaking truth where people feared to hear it. 6 minutes. I only need 6 minutes with the microphone to remove the perfect mask of a bride and outline an escape for my son. By the time I put my wine glass down, the whole room stood up. They were not applauding the bride. They chose justice. My name is Eleanor Whitford. At 62 years old, I have learned that the most dangerous moments are not the loud ones, but the quiet ones, like this one. The sun was bleeding out over the Maple Key vineyard, a deep, expensive crimson that stained the hills. It was beautiful, if you ignored the chill creeping in. Low-strung yellow lights flickered to life above the rows of white chairs, casting a synthetic glow on the faces of the guests. Every detail, from the hydrangeas tied to the aisle to the precise 4-piece string quartet playing something modern and joyless, screamed money. It screamed control. It screamed Sloane. My son, Daniel, stood near the pale birch archway, tugging at the collar of his ridiculously expensive tuxedo. At 34, he still looked like the boy I raised, but hollowed out. His eyes, which used to be bright with easy laughter, were constantly scanning the crowd, looking for her. He was a man caught in a beautifully designed trap. Sloane Mercer, 31, and vibrating with ambitious energy, was a financial lawyer who treated life like a hostile takeover. She found Daniel, saw his good nature and his inheritance, my late husband's legacy, and began her acquisition. She was standing by the entrance, a vision in architectural white, giving rapid-fire instructions to a stressed-looking wedding planner. I had been standing near the guest book, which was really just an iPad demanding email addresses, when she glided over to me. Her smile was a masterpiece of dentistry, utterly devoid of warmth. "Eleanor," she said, her voice a low hiss designed to travel no further than my ear. "You look lovely. Sloane, you've done a remarkable job." Her eyes hardened. The smile didn't move. "I'm glad you think so. This day is the culmination of 2 years of planning. It needs to be perfect." She leaned in, the scent of expensive perfume washing over me. "You just need to stay quiet. Don't ruin my day." It was not a request. It was an order, delivered with the same sterile precision she used to close a deal. Before I could form a response, Daniel was there, his face pale and slick with a thin sheen of sweat. "Mum? Sloane? Is everything okay?" "Everything is perfect, darling," Sloane said, portraying his arm. "I was just telling your mother how happy we are that she's here." I looked at my son, waiting for him to meet my eyes, to see the flash of steel he knew I possessed. He looked away. "Mom, the usher will show you to your seat." I thought I was sitting up front. "Daniel," with the family. Sloane and we adjusted the seating chart. "For Flo," he stammered, gesturing vaguely. "It's just for the ceremony. I'll explain after." "After," I said. It was not a question. He wouldn't look at me. He just gave my arm a gentle, dismissive push toward a young man in a matching tuxedo. "It's better this way. Please." I was guided not to the front row, reserved for the Mercers and their powerful, empty-looking friends, but to a seat 3 rows back, partially obscured by a large floral arrangement. I was being hidden. They thought I was weak. They mistook my grief-worn patience for senility. They thought I was just a sad, quiet widow. Too bad. I was just holding my breath before a deep dive. As I sat down, My hand instinctively went to the small, elegant clutch in my lap. Inside, past the tissues and the lipstick I would not be reapplying, was a single folded piece of paper. It was a printout of an email Sloane had accidentally forwarded to a shared family account 2 weeks ago. An email not intended for me. The subject line was burned into my memory guardianship package. Expedited. I watched Sloane take her place. Her back, rigid. Her control, absolute. I watched my son take his, a handsome prisoner walking to his own execution. The string quartet quieted. The officiant, a man who looked more like a CEO than a clergyman, stepped up to the microphone. "Welcome, friends and family." His voice boomed, overly amplified. "We are gathered here to celebrate the union of Daniel Whitford and Sloane Mercer. Before we begin, a small scheduling update." He glanced at a card, then looked out over the crowd with practiced sincerity. "Due to the wonderful fullness of our program this evening, the traditional toast from the mother of the groom has been removed to allow for more time for dancing." A few guests murmured, glancing back at me with polite pity. Daniel flinched. Sloane's posture remained unchanged. I felt the corners of my mouth lift in the smallest of smiles. They had just removed the only lock on the cage. The officiant's voice was a smooth, corporate drone, reading a script about love that sounded like a merger proposal. It gave me time to think. Time to remember who I was before Sloane Mercer decided I was a prop to be managed. For 28 years. I was the head of ethics and mediation at the Northwood Institute of Civic Ethics. It's not a place you've heard of. We were intentionally obscure. My job was to be the quietest person in the loudest rooms. I mediated billion-dollar corporate disputes, quieted potential scandals for universities, and convinced politicians to walk back from the brink, all without leaving a public trace. My name was never in the paper. My successes were defined by the disasters that didn't happen. The work required meticulous record-keeping, an ironclad memory, and the ability to keep my identity and my methods completely confidential. I was widowed young. My husband, David, left me with a 3-year-old Daniel and a mountain of grief. I raised my son on my own, balancing my high-stakes, invisible career with scraped knees and science projects. I taught him our family's one true principle, the one David and I had lived by. It doesn't count if you're good when people are watching. Daniel, the only thing that matters is choosing the right thing when no one is. It seemed he had forgotten that lesson, or perhaps he was just too scared to practice it. My professional life required a bland public facade. I was Eleanor, who works for a non-profit. This anonymity, once my greatest professional asset, became my greatest personal vulnerability. The day Daniel brought Sloane home, the distance began. It was subtle at first. Missed Sunday dinners, phone calls that felt rushed. Then came the redefining of boundaries, as Sloane called it. It was a sterile, corporate term for isolating my son. She explained, in that same condescending tone she used at the vineyard, that Daniel's priority was now their new family unit. My role was to be supportive, peripheral, and quiet. So, I retreated. I played the part of the sweet, slightly .com, harmless mother. I didn't boast about the time I'd saved a governor's career with a single 3-hour conversation, or the hostile board I'd disarmed with nothing but a timeline of facts. I let Sloane think I was simple. I believed that my silence, my complete and total capitulation, would keep the peace, would keep Daniel in my life, even if it was just at the edges. In the quiet evenings, when the house felt too large, I'd go through my files. I still had some of Daniel's old college invoices. I'd been paying off a few of his lingering student loans, quietly. Just a few $100s here and there. He never knew. It was just a way to feel connected, to still be his provider in some small way. The first real crack in my passive facade appeared 6 months ago. We were at a sterile brunch. Sloane was discussing her parents' retirement community. "It's so important to have a plan," she'd said, aiming her words at me while ostensibly speaking to Daniel. "Especially for long-term care, for seniors who get forgetful. We need to make sure all your assets are protected. Eleanor, for your own good?" Forgetful. The word hung in the air, a clinical, targeted release weapon. I said nothing. I just smiled, sipped my watery mimosa, and noted the date and time. That evening, I went home and opened a new file, a locked, digital one. I began to document every interaction, every casual slight, every backhanded question about my finances, every time she joked about my memory, my old habits, the ones that had saved corporations and reputations, resurfaced. The note-taking, the time-stamping, the cross-referencing of conversations. The seed of conflict was sown. My silence, which I had intended as a white flag of surrender, was now a blind. I was no longer a mother in retreat. I was a mediator gathering briefs. I was preparing my case. And as I sat there in the third row, hidden behind the flowers, I knew the time for quiet preparation was over. The officiant's voice droned on. I tuned him out, focusing instead on the file in my mind. The file I'd labeled Sloane. Her first move, classic isolation, was executed with chilling efficiency. Daniel's old college friends, the ones who knew him as Danny and remembered him before ambition consumed him, were suddenly a bad influence. His Aunt Catherine, my late husband's sister, was too negative. One by one, Sloane managed Daniel's calendar, his social life, and his relationships, pruning away anyone who wasn't, in her words, useful to their new life. Then came the email, the one I still had in my purse. It had appeared in my inbox by mistake, a clumsy forward from Daniel's account. He must have been trying to send it to his personal and accidentally hit a group list that still included me. The subject line was Conservatorship, Guardianship, Fast Track. The body was a short, cold message from Sloane to Daniel, telling him to handle the signature before their next meeting. But the most alarming part was the CC line. A senior advisor at Kestrel and Marrow Law, a firm known for its aggressive, take-no-prisoners estate litigation. My old instincts took over. I started digging, quietly. I looked at the wedding expenses. Daniel had mentioned, with a stressed sigh, that things were costing more than expected. I offered to help, and he gratefully gave me access to the shared planning spreadsheet. The numbers were staggering. $200,000 for a single evening. But the payments were the problem. The deposits weren't going to Maple Key Vineyard. They were going to a limited liability company I'd never heard of. A quick search showed it was a shell corporation, registered just 6 months prior. The payment source, routed through Hearthline Bank, was untraceable at first glance. The true moment of ice came on a Tuesday. I'd stopped by their condo to drop off some old family photos Daniel had asked for. Sloane was in a meeting, and he was working from home. He stepped out to take a call, leaving his laptop open. On the screen was a document draft, a proposal for the Whitford Family Trust. My eyes scanned the text. It wasn't a proposal. It was a transfer agreement. It outlined a plan to move my house, my fully paid-off home that David and I had bought together, into this new trust. A trust that, according to the fine print, would be managed by Sloane Mercer. As sole trustee, I took a picture of the screen with my phone. When Daniel returned, I said nothing. I decided to test the waters. I waited until the next family dinner. I kept my voice light, casual. Sloane, I saw an interesting email about a family trust the other day. It looked quite complex. What are your thoughts on that kind of planning? She didn't blink. She put down her wine glass and gave me that bright, empty smile. Eleanor, you shouldn't worry your head about these things. It's just legal housekeeping. She reached over and patted my hand. You're being far too sensitive. We're handling everything. That was the moment, the turning point. The realization that my son was not just complicit, he was a victim of his own passivity. I watched him a week later at their kitchen counter. Sloane put a stack of papers in front of him. Just the final venue contracts. Darling, I need you to sign so we can lock the date. He was on his phone, distracted. Yeah, sure. He scribbled his name on 3 different signature lines, not once looking up from his screen. He was signing away his life. For fast, he didn't read a single word. My son, the man I taught to question everything, was lost. Sloane was not just marrying him, she was acquiring him. And me. That night, I made a call I hadn't made in a decade. Marcus Hale, please. Marcus and I went back 15 years. He was a brilliant, ferocious, independent legal counsel. I had once mediated a high-profile case he was involved in, saving his client and his own reputation from a public implosion. He owed me. He knew it. We met at an obscure coffee shop 20 miles out of town. I didn't say hello. I just slid the printout of the email across the table. Kestrel and Marrow, I said. Guardianship. Fast track. Marcus read it. His easy demeanor vanished. Eleanor, who is this for? Me. He took a long sip of his coffee. They're moving against you. This is aggressive. He made one call, right there at the table, speaking in low tones. He hung up and looked at me. It's worse than you think. This isn't just exploratory. The petition for an emergency conservatorship is drafted. The forms are ready and waiting at their office. They can't, I said. I'm perfectly healthy. They just need one thing, Marcus said, his eyes holding mine. A single, credible report of cognitive decline or senile impairment. One doctor's signature. Sloane's words echoed in my head. Forgetful. Too sensitive. Don't worry your head. It was a systematic, calculated campaign to paint me as incompetent, to steal my home, my son, and my name. My plan changed. This was no longer about defense. This was not about keeping the peace. This was about setting a boundary. This was about truth. Thank you, Marcus, I said, sliding the email back into my purse. Now, I need you to find me a few things, and I need you to be invisible. My shift from defense to offense was quiet. It was total, and it had just begun. Sloane's campaign to prove me forgetful was clumsy, but I couldn't risk a single doctor, bought or charmed, signing that paper. My first move was to build an ironclad defense against the very attack she was planning. I scheduled a full-spectrum neuropsychological evaluation, not with my longtime family doctor, who Sloane had already, helpfully, tried to book an appointment with on my behalf, but with a top specialist at a hospital 2 towns over. a man who had previously served as an expert witness in cases I'd mediated. I sat through 4 hours of memory tests, logic puzzles, and psychological interviews. The resulting report was 30 pages long and ended with a single, unambiguous summary. Subject demonstrates cognitive and executive function well above the 90th percentile for her age group. Full mental capacity is unequivocally confirmed. I had it notarized. Next, I updated my power of attorney documents. My previous directives were standard, naming Daniel as my sole agent. I tore them up. The new ones, drafted by Marcus, were a fortress. Any change to my medical or financial status, any attempt to enact the POA, now required the signatures of 2 independent, board-certified physicians, neither of whom could have any prior financial relationship with the Mercer family or Kestrel and Marrow. I had locked the door. Now, it was time to go on offense. I brought in Beatrice Sutter. Beatrice had been the chief clerk of the civil court for 30 years. She knew every loophole, every procedural trick, and every buried file in the county. She also owed me for the time I'd quietly handled a situation involving her grandson. She and Marcus formed my small, invisible team, while I was the public-facing, harmless mother-in-law. Marcus and Beatrice followed the money. The shell corporation for the wedding was just the start. The payments are listed as investment consultation fees, Marcus reported, his voice tight with professional anger. They're flowing from the wedding fund into a second LLC, Mercer Ridge Advisory. Sloane's company, I asked. Her cousins. Beatrice supplied, having already run the business filings. A 22-year-old kid. It's a classic wash. She's overbilling the wedding, which Daniel is paying for, and pocketing the difference as consulting fees to her family. The next week, Sloane stopped by my house, unannounced, just to help me pick out some decorations for the rehearsal dinner. This was the moment I had anticipated. Before she arrived, I had placed a small digital camera on the bookshelf in my study, completely legal within my own home. I made her a cup of tea. I just need to find those old fabric samples, I said, feigning a senior moment. They must be in the attic. I'll be right back. I was gone for 10 minutes. When I reviewed the footage later, my blood ran cold. It took her less than 60 seconds. She went straight to my desk, opened the drawer where I kept my financial statements, and photographed 5 different documents with her phone. My bank statements, my mortgage-free deed, my private investment portfolio. She wasn't just planning a coup. She was taking inventory. I now had the why and the how. I had the financial trail and the visual proof of her intent. I needed one more piece of voice. The calls started 2 days later, always from a blocked number. Mrs. Whitford, a disguised, synthesized voice would say, "Just sign the trust papers. It's better for Daniel. You don't want his career to suffer. Do you sign? And he'll be safe." I recorded every single one. It was time to assemble the full package. I contacted Ivy Romero. Ivy was a young, hungry investigative reporter at the local paper, a woman I'd mentored through a fellowship at Northwood years ago. I trusted her integrity. We met at the public library. I gave her the entire file, the financial trace from Marcus, the business filings from Beatrice, the high-definition video of Sloane's theft, and the audio files of the threatening calls. "Ivy," I said, "this is all yours, but it's under embargo. Not one word, not one whisper, until after the wedding ceremony is scheduled to conclude. 9:30 p.m. Saturday." Her eyes were wide. Mrs. Whitford, this is a bombshell. I know, I said. I am giving you the story, but I am giving Daniel the choice. Finally, I asked Beatrice to do one last check. Sloane Mercer. She's too polished. See if she's ever used another name. Check marital records. Every surrounding county. Go back 10 years. On it, Beatrice said. I had one final piece of insurance. I set up a timed email. The recipient was Ivy Romero. The attachment was the complete evidence package, including a new statement from me. It was scheduled to send at 9:15 p.m. on the night of the wedding. I had a 3-hour window. If I failed, if I was stopped, or if my nerve broke, the dead man's switch would go off. The story would break, and the fallout would be catastrophic, but it would be public. My silence was now a weapon, primed and aimed. I just had to wait for the ceremony to begin. The rehearsal dinner was a performance of intimacy, staged in the vineyard's barrel room. The air was heavy with the smell of old oak, new money, and unspoken anxieties. A long, baronial table, clearly meant to evoke some kind of feudal royalty, dominated the space. Sloane, naturally, had managed the seating chart. Daniel was at the head, flanked by Sloane and her parents. I was not at that table. I was placed at a small, round satellite table near the catering exit, grouped with a distant cousin from Sloane's side and 2 junior associates from her law firm. It was a public demotion, a clear signal I was not family. I was an audience. When Daniel stood to speak, the room quieted. He held a small, folded piece of paper in his visibly trembling hand. He did not look at me. He looked at the paper, and he read. Sloane, he began, his voice devoid of all its natural warmth. You have brought structure and focus to my life. He paused, as if for effect, but it just felt empty. I am so excited for our shared future and for the synergistic partnership we are building. My blood ran cold. Synergistic partnership. That was not my son. That was her. Those were Sloane's words. Her cold, transactional vocabulary, being piped through the man I had raised. It was the saddest, most sterile speech I had ever heard. My eyes scanned the room, desperate for a human reaction, and I caught the gaze of Nina, one of the bridesmaids. Nina was Daniel's best friend from college, a fiercely loyal, bright woman who I knew had been slowly iced out of his life over the past year. Our eyes locked for a single, desperate second. She looked terrified. She gave me the smallest, almost imperceptible shake of her head, a silent, frantic warning. Before Sloane's sharp gaze swept the table, and Nina quickly looked down at her plate. In that moment, the chill of the stone room, the smell of the wine, it all faded. I was transported back 20 years, standing in our old kitchen. My husband, David, was leaning against the counter, his arms crossed, watching a teenage Daniel pace and rant about some perceived injustice at school. I remembered David's laugh, how he'd walked over and put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. It's easy to be right when it's easy, Bud, David had said. The real test is whether you'll stand up when it costs you something. Don't you ever let anyone teach you how to bow to something that's wrong. His voice, so clear in my memory, was a physical jolt. I looked at Daniel, who had just finished his scripted praise and was now bowing his head as Sloane kissed him. A profound, cold shame washed over me. Not for him, but for myself. For my silence. For letting him learn to bow. As Daniel sat, Sloane stood, tapping her wine glass with a painted fingernail. "Thank you, darling." "Beautifully said." Her smile was wide and brilliant, aimed at the crowd. "And now, just a quick note for tomorrow's schedule from our wonderful MC, James." The MC, a man with a dazzling white smile and the air of a game show host, stepped forward. "Thank you. Sloane. Just finalizing the timeline for tomorrow's magic. We'll have the vows, the rings, the kiss, and then we move to the toasts. We'll be hearing from Sloane's father, and of course, from the best man." He paused, glancing at an index card. "And that's our lineup. We're keeping it tight, elegant, and moving right along." Sloane laughed, a light, airy sound that didn't reach her eyes. "I had to be the edit police. We were going to have a slot for Eleanor, but honestly..." She looked at me, her face a perfect mask of concern. "We all know how emotional mothers can get. I thought it best to just save her the stress." She smiled directly at me, a look of pitying, victorious condescension. "We'll just let her relax and enjoy the night. No pressure." The room chuckled. It was a masterful, public execution. She had dismissed me, infantilized me, and cut off my only official platform, all while posing as a thoughtful, concerned bride. It was brutal. At that exact moment, I saw the Vineyard's event manager discreetly hand the MC an envelope. I was close enough to see the letterhead on the check inside as he slipped it into his jacket pocket. Mercer Ridge Advisory. My phone vibrated in my lap. A single text from Beatrice. "I'm in the parking lot. You need to see this. Now. Urgent." I stood up. My chair scraped against the stone floor, a harsh, ugly sound in the polite quiet. Sloane looked up, her eyes flashing with pure annoyance at the interruption. "My apologies," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying across the room. "Such a lovely, long dinner. It must be an old woman's bladder." I smiled sweetly at Sloane. "Please, don't let me interrupt the synergy." I walked out of the barrel room, past the curious, pitying stares of the guests, and into the cold night air. Beatrice's car was parked in the darkest corner of the gravel lot, engine off. I climbed into the passenger seat. The cab was cold. She didn't say a word. She just handed me a manila file. I opened it. Inside, under the dim glow of the overhead light, was a single, certified document. A copy of a marriage certificate from Washoe County, Nevada. Date of marriage 3 years ago. Groom Ethan Carrow, bride Sloane Mercer. I stared at it. I couldn't form a thought. Beatrice. "I just got off the phone with the county clerk's office," Beatrice said, her voice flat and grim. "I had them run a search for dissolution, annulment, divorce. Nothing. Zero. Zip." I looked at her, the pieces clicking into place with a sickening, heavy thud. She's still married. As of 5 p.m. this evening, yes," Beatrice said. "She never finalized it. According to the clerk, the other party, this Ethan Carrow, signed his part of the dissolution papers, but she never filed the final decree. She let it lapse." The implications hit me. This wasn't just theft. This wasn't just a guardianship plot. This was a long-term, multi-state fraud. "So, tomorrow," I whispered. "The wedding. Tomorrow," Beatrice finished. "If she signs that new license with Daniel, she's committing felony bigamy. The entire marriage will be invalid." I sat in the cold car, the certified copy of the Nevada marriage license heavy in my lap. "So it's active," I stated, the words hanging in the frosted air. "Not just active," Beatrice said, her phone already lighting up with a call. "Hold on. It's Marcus. I'm putting him on speaker." "Beatrice?" Marcus's voice was sharp, cutting through the small speaker. "I'm running the database from my end. You were right. She's listed. But the annulment file, it's not just pending. It was kicked back. It's returned for deficiencies." "Deficiencies?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "The other party," Marcus said, and I could hear him scrolling. "This Ethan Caro. He never signed the final response forms. The court returned the entire package to her legal counsel over 2 years ago. She never refiled. She just let it sit. Eleanor. She is, without a single doubt, legally married to this man." I leaned back against the headrest, the implications suffocating me. "Bigamy," I whispered. "Felony level." Marcus confirmed. "If she signs that license with Daniel tomorrow, the entire marriage is invalid from the start. But more than that, she's committing a criminal offense. She's exposing herself, and Daniel, to massive legal penalties and public humiliation." This changed everything. This wasn't just greed. It was reckless, desperate, and deeply fraudulent. "Marcus," I said, my voice hardening, finding its old professional tone. "The family trust, the one meant to take my house. I need you to look at the signature page. I have a photo." I texted him the image I'd taken from Daniel's laptop. The line was silent for 30 seconds. Then, a sharp, angry intake of breath. "Eleanor, this isn't Daniel's handwriting. This is a verified digital signature." "He signs things on his phone all the time," I said, the defense rising in my throat. "Sloane gives him papers." "No," Marcus interrupted, his voice firm. "You don't understand. This is a secure certificate signature, the kind used to execute high-level contracts. It's time-stamped. It's from 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, 2 weeks ago, and it's linked to an IP address." "Her condo," I guessed. "Worse. Her office. Kestrel and Marrow. She used his digital signature, likely harvested from another document, to execute a trust agreement that effectively strips you of your primary asset. And she did it from her law firm in the middle of the night, while your son was sleeping." A vibration in my clutch. I had stepped away from the rehearsal dinner so quickly I'd forgotten my phone. It was Nina, the terrified bridesmaid. I silenced the call. I couldn't speak to her. Not yet. "There's more," Marcus said, his voice grim. "Ivy Romero just sent her confirmation. She's got surveillance photos." Ivy, my reporter, had been working. Photos of what? Sloane at the Mercer Ridge Advisory Offices, the shell company, not during the day. 4 separate occasions, always after 11 p.m. The nights of the big wire transfers from the wedding fund. She's not just laundering the money. Eleanor. She's personally overseeing the transfer. She's the one moving the pieces. I hung up with Marcus, my hands shaking, not with fear, with a cold, clarifying rage. My phone buzzed again. A text from Nina. "Please, I have to tell you something. She tried to use me." I dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring, her voice a terrified whisper. "Mrs. Whitford." "Oh God, Mrs. Whitford. I'm so sorry." "Nina, what is it? Are you safe?" "I'm in the bathroom," she sobbed, the sound muffled. "I saw you leave. I have to tell you, Sloane. She asked me to do something. About a month ago. What did she ask? Nina. She had these papers. She said you were getting confused. She said she was worried you were spending your money too fast. She asked me to sign a statement. An affidavit. My blood froze. What kind of affidavit? As a witness, she cried. A witness to your capacity. That's the word she used. She had a list of things. Confused dates. Missed appointments. Emotional instability. She wanted me to sign it, to say I'd seen it all. She said it was just a formality to help Daniel manage your care. And what did you do? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I told her I hadn't seen any of that. I refused. She got so cold. Eleanor. She told me I was not being a team player and that she'd remember this. I think she cut me out of the wedding party text chain after that. Oh God, Daniel is in so much trouble, isn't he? Yes, he is, I said. Nina, why can't he see this? He can't, she said, her voice rising in panic. She cut off his email, his personal email, 2 days ago. She told him it was a wedding gift, to disconnect and be present. She said she'd handle all the vendor noise so he could focus. He's locked out. He has no idea what's happening. He's completely blind. He wasn't just passive. He was isolated. He was in a digital cage. I hung up. I looked at Beatrice, her face pale in the dashboard light. What's the play, Eleanor? The play, I said, is that this doesn't happen in the dark anymore. This happens in the light, in front of everyone. The clerk's office is closed tomorrow, Beatrice said, anticipating me. They won't be able to file the license, but she'll sign it. She'll have the ceremony. She'll get the photos. She'll lock him down socially, then destroy him legally on Monday. I shook my head. No. We need someone who can stop the signing itself. Can you? Beatrice smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. I'm already ahead of you. I called in a favor. The deputy county clerk, Jenny Miles, owes me for my son's high school recommendation. She's on call for emergency filings all weekend. She has agreed to be available. She is, in fact, having dinner about 10 miles from here, and is willing to stop by the vineyard if she gets a call about a procedural irregularity. Good, I said. Beatrice, you are a marvel. I went back to my own car. I sat in the dark for a long time. I took out a piece of my own letterhead, the thick, creamy stock from the Northwood Institute, and a good, heavy pen. I began to write. I would not be delivering an angry tirade. I would not be a grieving mother. I would be a mediator. I structured it perfectly. Introduction. A warm, genuine memory of Daniel. A toast to love. The pivot. A statement on truth. They asked me to be quiet. The evidence. The cognitive assessment. The family trust. The digital signature. The revelation. The bigamy. The felony. The invalidity. The conclusion. Not an accusation. A choice. A direct, public question to my son. I finished writing. It was concise. It was lethal. It was true. I checked my watch. 9:45 p.m. The rehearsal dinner would be winding down. I looked at the timed email I had set up the dead man's switch. It was still scheduled to send the entire evidence package to Ivy Romero tomorrow night. At 9:15 p.m., I left it. I would give my speech. I would give Daniel his choice. But if Sloane, or her lawyers, Or a panicked Daniel tried to silence me. If they cut the mic, if they had security escort me out, that email would fly. The truth would come out, one way or another. The game was set. The ceremony began exactly at 5:30 p.m., just as the sun began its final dramatic dip. A wind, too cool for a September evening, picked up from the west. It skimmed across the vineyards, making the white tablecloths in the distance flap and snap like agitated flags. A small, cold omen. Sloane was a vision of minimalist, brutalist elegance. Her dress was not a romantic cascade of lace, but a severe architectural column of white silk. I noticed the tiny, flesh-colored wire running from her hair down her back. A hidden microphone. Even her vows would be a broadcast, perfectly modulated. She was constantly, subtly, adjusting the MC's script, tapping his arm and pointing to her cue cards, even as the bridal march began. I watched Daniel. He stood under the birch arch. His hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He was shaking. Not a romantic tremor, but a deep, visceral tremble. He lifted his head, his eyes scanning the rows, looking past the Mercers in the front, past his own groomsmen. He was looking for me. I was in the third row, partially hidden, just as they'd planned. I held his gaze. I gave him no comfort, no reassuring nod. I just held it. He looked away, terrified. As the officiant droned on, I saw a commotion near the back. A caterer, a man in a chef's jacket, was in a hushed, frantic argument with the event manager. I saw him mouth the words. The final payment? It didn't clear. The event manager pointed to Sloane, who was currently holding Daniel's hand and smiling for the cameras. The chef, braver than I'd anticipated, actually approached the edge of the stage. He hissed, "Ms. Mercer." Sloane's head snapped. Her smile, which was fixed in place, became a rictus. She gave the tiniest, sharpest shake of her head and whispered, "After. You'll be paid after we sign." She turned back to the officiant, her smile instantly reforming, flawless. I glanced to the side of the stage. A small, skirted table was set up with a pristine white runner, a fancy pen, and the official-looking marriage license. The signing was the final act, the legal consummation after the social performance. That was the moment she was waiting for. They exchanged their scripted vows. Daniel's voice was a reedy, thin thing, his words about forever sounding like a life sentence. Sloane's, by contrast, were clear, projecting, thanks to her hidden mic. They sounded like contractual obligations. "I vow to be your partner, your advocate, and your strength." It sounded like she was reading a prospectus. They were pronounced man and wife. The kiss was brief, dry, and angled for the cameras. The guests stood. The music swelled. The tension was unbearable. As they walked back up the aisle, 100 phone cameras flashing. Sloane's control was absolute. Daniel was a prop she was towing. We moved to the cocktail area. I kept to the perimeter. Nina, the bridesmaid, found me near the bar. Her face was pale, her eyes red. "Eleanor," she whispered, her hands shaking as she fixed her bouquet. "Nina, you did the right thing by refusing to sign," I said, keeping my voice low. "It's worse." She reached into the bodice of her dress and pulled out a tiny, silver USB stick. It was disguised as a keychain on her lipstick. She's bragging. Bragging about what? She sent an email to her cousin, the one at Mercer Ridge. I have access to Daniel's old shared cloud account. The one she thinks is deleted. It's not. I'm still on it. The email was in the sent folder. She must have used his laptop. Nina pushed the drive into my hand, closing my fingers around it. She sent it this morning. The subject line was locked. The body just said, "The old woman's house is officially our B&B by Monday. Get the appraisal ready." My hand closed around the small, cold piece of metal. Thank you. Nina, you are braver than you know. Go. Enjoy the party. Stay away from her. I slipped the USB into my clutch. It was time. I found Beatrice, who was sipping a seltzer near the edge of the tent, looking for all the world like a distinguished, harmless guest. I caught her eye. I gave one single, decisive nod. Beatrice smiled. "Showtime," she murmured, pulling out her phone to text the county clerk. The lights dimmed for the reception. The MC, James, stepped onto the dance floor, his smile bright and artificial. "All right, everyone, let's get those glasses charged. It is time for our toasts." He looked at his card. But first, a very special surprise. Sloane has arranged a special presentation to honor her wonderful parents, who have made this. His voice faltered. A stagehand, a young man I had spoken to earlier, had just handed him a new, laminated card. A card I had personally given to the venue's head of operations, the real operations manager, not Sloane's wedding planner 2 hours earlier, along with a certified check to cover the last-minute program update fee, and a copy of the contract clause that allowed for client-directed programmatic changes with management's signature. My signature was on the original venue contract, as the secondary financier, a detail Sloane had conveniently forgotten. The MC stared at the new card. It was not a suggestion. It was his official, paid-for script. His eyes widened in panic. He looked at Sloane, who was frowning, confused. He looked back at the card. He looked at the stage manager, who gave him a sharp, "go on" gesture. "Ah," the MC stammered, his professional veneer cracking. "My apologies. A program update. It seems we do have a toast from the mother of the groom. A welcome addition." Sloane's head whipped toward the stage. Her face, for the first time, was not composed. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "Please," the MC said, his voice now shaky as he read the script he'd been given. "Please put your hands together for Mrs. Eleanor Whitford." A single spotlight, the one I had requested, swung from the stage and hit me at my table. I stood up. I picked up my full, untouched glass of champagne, and I began to walk toward the stage. I stepped onto the small stage, the warmth of the spotlight hitting me as the baffled MC moved aside. I took the microphone from its stand, my hand steady. The tent, filled with 200 people, fell into a profound, electric silence. Sloane, at the head table, was locked in place, her face a mask of disbelief, hardening into pure rage. Daniel, my son, just looked broken, his eyes wide and fixed on me. I lifted my champagne glass. "Good evening," I began, my voice clear and amplified, filling the space. When Daniel was 8 years old, he found a fledgling sparrow that had fallen from its nest. He was devastated. He brought it to me and asked, "Mom, how do I fix this?" And I told him the truth. "We might not be able to fix it," I said, "but we must never, ever pretend we didn't see it." He sat with that tiny bird for 2 days, guarding it, just so it wouldn't be alone when the end came. I kept my eyes on him. That is the Daniel I know, the man with a core of profound goodness, the man who protects, the man who refuses to look away from the truth. I set the glass down. The tone of the mediator, the one I had used for 30 years, took over. I was asked to be quiet tonight. In fact, I was told to, but I have learned that silence, the kind of silence that is meant to keep the peace, is often the most violent thing you can do. It doesn't keep peace. It just lets the people we love wander further away, lost in a story that someone else is writing for them. I turned slightly, addressing the room. For the past 6 months, a story has been written about me, a story that I am forgetful, that I am confused, that I am incompetent. It's a convenient story, if you want to take someone's voice. But the truth is, I'm a mediator. I listen, and I keep meticulous records. From my clutch, I took a single, folded paper. This is a summary of a full-spectrum neuropsychological evaluation. I took 3 weeks ago. I will be publishing it. The conclusion, in case anyone is curious, is that I possess cognitive and executive function in the 90th percentile for my age group. The rumors of my incapacity are, like the story they serve, a complete fabrication. A low murmur started. But why write that story? The truth is, it is much easier to take from someone you have painted as weak. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The truth is a set of facts. Fact A: family trust was drafted 2 months ago to transfer my home, the home my husband and I bought, into a new entity. The sole trustee of that entity. I paused, letting the question hang. Ms. Sloane Mercer. Fact: this trust was executed using my son's digital signature, a signature he did not know he was giving at 2:30 in the morning on a Tuesday, from an IP address registered to the Kestrel and Marrow law firm. Fact: over $40,000 of wedding funds, paid by my son, were not paid to this vineyard. They were routed as consulting fees to a shell corporation. Reference number 88B, a company called Mercer Ridge Advisory, owned and operated by Sloane's cousin. The murmuring stopped. The silence was absolute. I turned, fully, to Daniel. He looked like he couldn't breathe. He was staring at Sloane, who was looking at me, her eyes vibrating with hate. "Daniel," I said, my voice softening. "Just for him?" "My boy, the man who sat with the sparrow. You have been isolated. You have been lied to. And you have been signing things you did not read." I took a breath, holding his gaze. "But you are not broken. You are just here. And you have a choice. Right here. Right now. In front of all these people who gathered to witness real love. You get to choose." I looked to the edge of the tent. But to make that choice, you need the final truth. Sloane's story, you see, is built on a foundation of omission. There is one more thing. I gave the signal, as if on cue. Beatrice Sutter, looking every inch the distinguished legal clerk she was, stepped calmly from the shadows. She did not walk to the stage. She walked to the center of the dance floor, holding a small folder. Sloane's father jumped to his feet. "What in God's name is this security stop, this farce? I would not. Mr. Mercer, sit down." Beatrice's voice cut through the air, sharp and official. "I am Beatrice Sutter, retired Chief Clerk of the County Court. I am here as an officer of the court to prevent a felony." A collective, Audible gasp swept the room. "Ms. Sloane Mercer," Beatrice said, as if reading a docket, "is currently and legally married to a Mr. Ethan Caro of Washoe County, Nevada. The marriage certificate is active. The dissolution file, case number NV2021-4478, was returned for deficiencies and was never finalized by Miss Mercer. It was done. The structure was gone. The tent poles were kicked out." I stepped back to the microphone. I looked at Sloane. Her face was chalk white. "Sloane," I said, my voice quiet, almost kind. "The microphone is here. This is your chance. Perhaps we have it all wrong. Perhaps it's all just paperwork." I held the microphone out, offering it. I said nothing else. I just waited. The seconds stretched. 5 seconds. 10. The silence was brutal, a vacuum that sucked all the air out of the tent. Guests were whispering, turning to each other. Did she say married? What's Mercer Ridge? Sloane finally moved. She stood up so fast her chair crashed backward to the floor. She clawed at the hidden microphone on her dress. It's not like that," she hissed, her voice accidentally booming through the main speakers. It's just paperwork. It's a bureaucratic mistake." She looked at Daniel, her eyes wild and desperate. "Daniel, tell them it's just paperwork." But Daniel wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. His face was a ruin of understanding, of shame, and of a sudden, terrible clarity. He was completely, utterly silent. He was frozen, dead center, in the truth I had just revealed. Sloane's desperate cry, "It's just paperwork," echoed into the stunned silence, amplified by the very microphone system she had set up to control her day. Before anyone could move, before Daniel could find his voice, a new figure stepped into the light at the edge of the tent. A woman in a dark, practical blazer. Ivy Romero. She held no camera. She held no microphone. She simply held up her press credentials to Sloane's father, who had started to move toward her. It was a calm, professional, and devastatingly public gesture. The moral pressure, the threat of public record, had just materialized. At the same instant, the event manager, the same man I'd seen arguing with the chef, hurried to the MC and took the microphone from his hand. His face was pale and furious. "Pardon me, ladies and gentlemen?" His voice boomed, sharp with adrenaline. "There will be a pause in the celebration. Our apologies. But the final, substantial payment for this evening's event, routed from Mercer Ridge Advisory, has just been officially flagged and blocked by Hearthline Bank, citing association with a fraudulent transaction." The room erupted. It was no longer a murmur. It was a roar. The financial truth, the bigamy, the public reporter. It was a three-pronged attack, and the entire narrative structure Sloane had built for 2 years collapsed in on itself. Sloane let out a sound, a short, strangled shriek of pure rage. She lunged, not at me, but at the MC, trying to grab the microphone he now held. "You can't," she screamed. "You have no—" "Sloane, no!" It was Nina. She stepped between Sloane and the MC, grabbing her arm. Sloane, in her blind fury, tried to shove her, but Nina held firm. "Sloane, stop. Just stop. Let Daniel speak." All eyes, including mine, snapped to my son. Daniel had not moved. He stood by the head table, a statue carved from ice. Sloane, her face contorted, turned to him. "Daniel?" Tell them, make them stop. Tell your mother to stop." He looked at her. He really looked at her. Perhaps for the first time. He saw the greed, the lies, the feral panic. He saw the woman who had used him, not the partner he'd pretended to have. Slowly, his hand, which was still shaking, rose to his chest. He fumbled for a moment with the perfect white rose pinned to his lapel. With a single, sharp tug, he ripped the boutonniere off, leaving a small, torn thread on the silk. He let the flower fall from his fingers. It hit the floor. He turned his head and looked at me. His eyes were clear. The fog was gone. He took one step toward the stage. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking, but it carried. "I'm so sorry. I am so sorry." I did not run to him. I did not hug him. I did not cry. My son had to make this choice, and he had to make it on his own. I simply, from the stage, gave him one single, validating nod. "I see you. Now stand up." He seemed to draw strength from that. He straightened his back, the back I hadn't seen straight in 2 years. He turned to face the woman he was supposed to spend his life with. "Sloane," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying in the sudden, breathless hush. The authority was back. "We're stopping. We are done here. We are not signing anything tonight, or ever." It was a kill shot. Sloane stared, her mouth open, all the fight gone, replaced by a cold, hollow understanding of total defeat. For a second, the tent was silent, and then, from the back, from a table of Daniel's old college friends, the not useful ones Sloane had tried to ban, one person stood up and started to clap. A slow, rhythmic, angry clap. Then another guest stood, and another. His Aunt Catherine, her face streaked with tears, got to her feet. Nina, at the side, stood, one by one, table by table. The guests, his friends, my friends, even some of the Mercer's stunned colleagues who understood legal and financial ruin when they saw it. They all rose. They were not applauding. They were bearing witness. They stood up. They were choosing a side, just as I had hoped. They were standing for the truth. The MC, seeing his night in ruins, but sensing the shift in the tide, grabbed the microphone from the event manager. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted over the applause, "we will be taking a brief intermission. The bar is open. Please help yourselves." The string quartet, with impressive professionalism, instantly struck up a frantic, cheerful Vivaldi. The house lights flared on, harsh and white, killing the romantic glow, exposing the entire, messy, beautiful truth. It was not chaos. It was a release. It was the collective, relieved exhale of 200 people who had just watched a man save his own life. I stepped back from the spotlight. My part done. My hand went to my clutch. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. The dead man's switch. The email to Ivy was still scheduled for 9:15 p.m. My son had made his choice. He didn't need the bomb. He just needed the ladder I'd thrown him. I went into my drafts. I hit cancel send on the timed email. But I did not delete it. I held the power to release it, should Sloane or her family try to fight back. I was quiet. I was prepared. And for the first time in a long time, I was at peace. As the applause for Daniel's choice began to subside, Beatrice moved with purpose. The party was frozen, guests standing, watching the final act. She walked directly to Daniel, past the irate Mercer parents, and handed him a single, official-looking document. "Mr. Whitford," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "This is a courtesy notice from the Deputy County Clerk. She is on site. Any marriage license presented by Sloane Mercer tonight will be refused and confiscated, pending a criminal investigation into bigamy and perjury." Daniel took the paper. It was his final shield. "It's a lie!" Sloane shrieked, finally finding her voice. "It's all lies that man, Ethan. It was years ago, it's in the past." "Then I have a question," a new voice called out. It was Marcus, my lawyer, standing near Beatrice. He was on his phone, holding it up. "I'm on the line with counsel for Ethan Caro. Mr. Caro, it seems, just filed a sworn affidavit with the Nevada court not 2 hours ago. It states Ms. Mercer actively refused to sign the final divorce decree, claiming she needed to keep her marital status open for a leverage play. He's been trying to get her to sign for 18 months. Sloane's face went white. The past had just become the present. "And that leverage play," Ivy Romero added, her voice calm as she stepped forward, "coincides perfectly with the timeline for the fast-track guardianship petition and the first wire transfers out of the wedding fund. It's not the past, Ms. Mercer. It was your business plan. It was over. All threads were tied. All escape routes were sealed." Daniel looked at Sloane. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound, cold pity. "Sloane," he said, his voice quiet. "Get off the stage, please. Go with your parents. Don't make this worse. Just go." It was an act of mercy, a final offer to keep a shred of her dignity. She looked at him. She looked at me. She looked at the 200 guests watching her. She chose not to take it. "You," she screamed at him, her voice a raw, ugly tear in the fabric of the evening. "You weak, stupid. You let her do this. You were nothing. I was making you something." She lunged at him, her hands raised, but his best man, finally moving, stepped between them and caught her by the arms. It was a pathetic, terrible end. She had, in her final act, lost herself. I stepped back to the microphone, which the MC had abandoned. The quartet had stopped playing. The only sound was Sloane's choked sobbing as her father pulled her, stumbling, from the stage. I waited. When the tent was quiet again, I said my last piece. "Love," I said, my voice steady, "is what is left when the truth is allowed to stand. The law will handle the rest." I set the microphone down. Daniel watched his future walk out of the tent. He then turned to Marcus. "You have the papers?" Marcus nodded, handing him a clipboard. Daniel walked to the center of the dance floor, to the small, white table that had been waiting for the marriage license. In front of everyone, he took a pen and signed the document Marcus had prepared. "I have just signed a full power of attorney for Mrs. Hale," Daniel announced, his voice strong, resonating with a new, hard-won authority. "He will be conducting a full forensic audit of every document I have signed for the last 2 years. This wedding, this event, is postponed indefinitely." He put the pen down, and then, for the second time, the guests moved. It was not a standing ovation of shock. It was a roar of approval. His Aunt Catherine, his friends, even the caterer in the back. They all stood. They clapped. They cheered. They whistled. They were not applauding an ending. They were applauding the beginning. They were applauding the man who finally, when it counted, stood up. I walked off the stage. I was not crying. My work was done. I found a quiet corner and pulled out my phone, sending a single text message to Nina. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for not signing. I walked out of the tent, away from the light and the noise, and into the vineyard. The cool night wind, the one that had promised a change hours ago, felt clean against my face. It smelled of damp earth and grapes. I had spent a lifetime mediating, hoping to keep the peace. But I had learned that some things cannot be mediated. They must be faced. I had hoped not to be loud. I had just hoped to be right on time. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you are listening from. So please, let me know in the comments. It's always wonderful to connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and show your support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.